I wanted us to bring in Professor Amanda and Professor Minna. So I don't know who can come in first, but I understand you come from two different worlds. The literary world, the material world. So
Minna's going to start.
Okay, Minna, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think Astrid put that together very well. And so in terms of the key findings of the book and this interdisciplinary nature that it has, and the question of silencing and violence, I think one particular chapter we would like to discuss in this context is Professor Jocelyn Alexander's The Dissident in Fiction and Non-Fiction. So it comes from the cluster entitled Literary World, as you mentioned. And in general, one could say that political role of literary expression in Zimbabwe should not be underestimated, because throughout the post-independence era, writers have engaged in critical political work, often contesting the official view on matters maintained by the political establishment. So in this respect, I would say Alexander's chapter is particularly interesting because she reads non-fictional accounts of Zimbabwean dissidents alongside three fictional novels. James Roy Hope's Shadows, Ivan Vera's The Stone Virgins, and Nobuya Rosa Juma's House of Stone. And she examines the multifaceted accounts of these texts provide of the figure of the dissident, a political rebel positioning himself against state violence within the era of Gugurahundi. And so just to contextualize the notion of dissident in the Gugurahundi. So after independence, Robert Mugabe commissioned the North Korean trained army brigade to sort out the dissident problem in the west of the country. The brigade targeted those who supported Mugabe's political rivals and those who were Ndebele by ethnicity. The ruling party justified the killings by claiming that the army brigade killed dissidents who were armed and dangerous and fighting a civil war. So Alexander takes this trope of a dissident and she shows how both in fictional and non-fictional works, dissidents emerge as complex, often marginalized characters, the history of violence and persecution. So she has a very interdisciplinary approach to the question of dissident and the history of dissidents. So, and then while examining this, she explained or explores how the non-fictional accounts of dissidents challenge the official nationalism that has supported Mugabe's and ZANU-PF's vision of post-independence Zimbabwe. So basically, here we get to the question of silencing, and these non-fictional accounts engage in counter-memory work and unsilencing officially repressed memories. And then she works on the fictional accounts or representations as well, and she locates the fictional contextualizes each fictional novel in the historical context of publication, and she concludes that in the psychologically nuanced presentations of dissidents, violence, and memory, the novels broaden the picture of dissidents produced by the non-fiction writers, whose projects were more tied to sort of political accountability and authoritative evidence. So, in other words, her interdisciplinary approach shows why it is meaningful to really read the non-fictional accounts and fictional representations of the nation's violence side by side. And by doing this, she contributes to the broader understanding of the nation's violent past. So this is sort of one, I think, a very important example of that sort of interdisciplinary work that she takes on in that chapter. Yep. Thanks.
Anotida, are you ready for some further examples?
Yes, I'm ready. I'm ready for that.
Okay, you're ready. I'm also ready. So I'm going to mention a couple of examples, both from the material world and the online worlds, just to give a sense of what different, the nature of these kinds of chapters and these ideas of materiality to start with. So within this cluster, I mean, as Minna had mentioned when she was giving us a table of contents, this material worlds is supposed to, and does, pay attention to voices and forms of material representation that are not very often sort of represented in such books. So I want to go back to Shari Eppel's chapter that has been mentioned before. It's called Exhumations. That's the unearthing of bodies, buried bodies, exhumations as performance, bones as provokers and invokers of the past in Matabele land. So what is so really powerful about this chapter is that Shari Eppel she is a forensic anthropologist, a Zimbabwean forensic anthropologist based in Bulawayo. And for decades, she and a team of local experts with her have been very carefully exhuming the bodies of those murdered by the state's 5th Brigade during Gukurahundi. This is now some 40 years ago already. And not only has she worked on the careful exhumation, but also worked with families and communities to carefully rebury these members of their families and communities, respectfully rebury them with the appropriate rituals. So for over 4 decades, this has been denied. The bodies themselves have been denied. The violence has been denied. And what she does is she, as a writer of this chapter, she draws on both the interviews, discussions at the grave sites during exhumations, but also on the very real materiality of bones, of fragments of clothing, even a radio that was buried with this young couple that she focuses on, like as a case study, Justin and Tembi, who were murdered during Gukurahundi. And this is a process by which communities, families get to revisit this past and face it and feel it and mourn and deal with some kind of healing, which the state has persistently denied over this period. So as Astrid has talked about, it's the silencing of past is as much part of the politics of the past and of the present. And so in doing this work and then writing about it, the chapter or the practice, this very material practice of exhumation and reburial, is a way of validating the sort of memories of violence that have been persistently silenced and provides a measure of healing. And she shows how the bones of the dead in themselves are witnesses to this past that has been silenced and also have a central place in truth-telling about these kind of literally buried pasts, and literally resurfaces a past that has not been able to be spoken about, and how that offers some kind of healing both to communities, families, and even Zimbabwe as a nation. So that's one of the chapters in this material world. And if there's time, if you don't mind, I've got a couple of others. Is there time for this? You can decide what to do with it. So then I want to take a very different register, which is, as he's already been mentioned, Owen Maseko, who is a renowned artist, Bulawayo-based artist. And this is going from exhumations and burials and bones to the materiality of very vibrant visual art. And we've got on the, of the cover of the book, we also have some of Owen's work. Minna has talked about Owen sketching in our workshop, but he's also produced some other art, especially one called Dancing with the Past, which was evoked by our workshop in Denmark. So Owen, who is not intentionally became a political artist, because an exhibition, a one-man exhibition in Bulawayo in 2010 at the National Gallery, this was not intended to be political, but spoke from the realities of the life he was living, the environment in which the history of Gukurahundi still lives, but is also silenced. The traumas are there, but they're sort of suppressed. So he wasn't intending to be a political artist, but he did this one-man show which recalled the horrors of Gukurahundi and simultaneously mocked the perpetrators. Now, that's a tough thing to do in Zimbabwe, but his art does that kind of thing. And so he does this one-man exhibition. I think there were 12 pieces of the paintings and 3 installations. Within 48 hours of presenting this exhibition at the National Gallery, which had windows facing onto the pavement so passers-by could see it, it was shut down by the government. It remained shut down for 5 years during a court case that said it was illegal, that called it a crime, that in the early days of that shutdown, he was himself, Owen was accused almost of treason, of inciting violence, falsifying something to incite violence and promote ethnic division. Highly ironic, given that it was telling about something that had actually happened. He was just representing something that had actually happened, which was about ethnicized violence itself. So fortunately, his case was thrown out personally, but for 5 years it was closed, locked up rooms, newspaper on the windows so nobody could actually see it. And eventually the court case ended, and even though there wasn't a charge, the exhibition was permanently banned. So it just shows something about how even visual art has such a powerful voice, especially when it speaks against a hegemonic narrative by the state, which has the power to violate this narrative, this alternative narrative. So it was a very strong illustration of how art, a form of material representation of the past, has such a powerful voice and must then be suppressed by the state.